I think, I don't know, I think it will be better to, you go first, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe just 1 second.
Yeah.
So we will start. Dominika.
Hello, can you hear me? I think, okay. Hi everyone, my name is Dominika Lasota. I'm a 20-year-old climate justice activist from Poland. And as a member of the global youth movement, Fridays for Future, together with my friends from across Europe, I used to fight for a safe and just future. But on 24th of February, we stopped fighting for a future. Because when your friend from Kharkiv calls you to say that he is running down to a bomb shelter because, as I quote, it all started, Dominika, and he promises to call you soon, whatever that means, you know that this fight is no longer for any hopeful tomorrow. It is about survival, and it is about now. From that paralyzing Thursday morning in the cold February, the Russian aggression became the new daily reality for us. And what came to light is that the addiction of our societies to the fossil fuels, most importantly Putin's fossil fuels, was making the unspeakable possible each day, with nearly €1 billion spent on gas, oil and coal by the European Union to Putin every single day. And so, in the times of a fossil fuel-driven climate crisis, here we are, facing a fossil fuel war in the continent that for decades has been repeating its promise that no such brutality would ever happen again. But to say that all of this was unpredictable wouldn't be true. Because as Marian Turski, a very, very renowned Polish survivor of Auschwitz, once said, wars do not fall from the sky. And the current war did not fall from the sky either. But it is a result of a political and economic system that is designed by those in power for crises and for wars to happen. We have been betrayed, and I, as a young person, especially feel betrayed, having to repeat for all of those years at school in Poland that, you know, we will never make this happen again. I feel betrayed by the politicians who for decades have been choosing profits and friendship with dictators over people, over our lives, over my life, over the lives of my Ukrainian friends. And so what we are left with now is a world in which my friend in Ukraine needs to hide in a basement to survive. A world in which a friend from India texts me that thousands of the people in her town suffer from unlivable heat waves. A world in which my friends in Uganda have to worry if they wouldn't be forced out from their houses so that another oil pipeline can be built, or a gas infrastructure, as happens in Senegal right now. A world in which ordinary citizens are left with a choice of either financing fossil fuels and Putin's war, or running into energy poverty. And at the same time, a world in which oligarchs, politicians, and fossil fuel CEOs can reap record profits because of the crises, the wars, and human tragedies. To them, all of these are financial opportunities. I do not want to live in a world like this. I think none of us deserves to live in a world like this, especially because there is an alternative. In Fridays for Future, and in many indigenous communities and many resistant movements, there's a very famous slogan that another world is possible because it is. Our economies do not have to run on energy that is stained with the blood of people or destructions of ecosystems worldwide. Our political systems can be something more than a TV show featuring old white men addicted to money and power. They really can be something more than that. Our societies are more than ready for a transformation towards a fossil-free reality that puts people first and leaves no one, and I mean no one, behind. This other reality is within reach. But until it becomes real, we fight. I, as a climate activist since 24th of February, together with my friends from Ukraine and across the world, we have been fighting daily to demand those in power to stop betraying us, to stop their political theater, because what they do is a theater. It's not the duty that they were hired by citizens to serve. So we've been all over the place. We've been across Europe, in Poland, Germany, Belgium, France, Italy. Everywhere we could go, we went, and we've been fighting, and the fight and the resistance is growing. Because if you hear any opinions that because of the war, we have to sacrifice climate policy, you have to realize that you're talking to a very cynical person or someone that is completely not aware of how these things are connected, because they are. And especially us, people who care, who have the sensitivity, and who have the energy and power to change things, we have to do our best to do so. And so I urge you to fight, because every degree of the warming matters. Every degree, every fraction of a degree that we're able to limit matters. Every million of euros that we're able to divert from Putin matters. Every infrastructure, every oil cargo, every gas pipeline, every coal exploitation we're able to stop matters. During this war, I think I realized finally that it's not that the end of the world is coming up. It's that ends of multiple worlds are happening right now, and we might not even be aware of it. Because my friend, who had to run down to the basement and then run away from Kharkiv and move away from his home, he lost his world. Because the friends in Uganda that I very gratefully have, whose villages, whose communities have to be completely destroyed because Total Energies from France comes there to build their eco pipeline, the world's longest pipeline, they are already losing a world. Many of the worlds have been lost, and we might not even be aware of it. And so I think the times that we're living in, we are not able to save everything. But there are many worlds that we are able to save. There are many worlds that we're able to treasure. And I think given the fact that some people in this world are so obsessed of sending the human to Mars, maybe instead of building alternative realities somewhere outside in the universe, we have to see the universe that we have in front of our eyes and make sure it's safe. On a final note, I know we're in Poland. We're in a country that has been, for decades, faced enormous challenges when it comes to transition away from fossil fuels. I think as a young person, to me, the transition isn't an option. And I think this war and the climate crisis that we're living in really made me aware that the fossil fuel phase out is not a nice to have. It's our only option to have any kind of livable future or a livable present. And so we need to fight for the just transition as if our lives depend on it, because they do. And so I urge you to fight. I'm glad I'm not alone, because sometimes during this period, which has been extremely dark for the past months, it felt as if the world is collapsing and I have no space to do anything, and that I'm alone in that, but I'm not. And so I'm glad you're here, but we have a big job to do. But I'm happy we are in this together, and I hope that from today we can leave this place and save some worlds that are left still. Thank you.
Thank you. Summertime in Europe. People enjoying their vacation. Talking about fun activities, sometimes being afraid of the new COVID-19 variation. The war in Ukraine captures our attention. But what about the climate crisis in this hot summer? This matter still seems for too many people not urgent. The climate crisis is more critical than ever. Kenyan families, for example, can no longer produce food after years of drought. People from Bangladesh are increasingly falling prey to cyclones and tidal waves. Residents from Belgium and Germany, whose homes were completely destroyed exactly a year ago, still don't have new housing. Why are still so many people neglecting these facts and our actions not taken? Climate change is about more than just nature. It's about justice and the future of humanity. More specifically, that one of my peers, young people who today often send the strongest signals and come together in the streets to demand action. If real action is not following, children and teenagers will be the biggest victims. Isn't this convincing enough to take action? There's a lot of talk about global warming, but pertinent change is yet to come. And meanwhile, time is ticking away. This leaves many young people, together with me, speechless. It seems that many adults do not take responsibility for the generation that will come after them, and that only the short-term perspectives attract their attention. Are people really only thinking about money and about the short term? Why is this? Surely the climate is widely reported in the media. Global warming can no longer be denied. I would suspect adults are interested in the future of us, their children and grandchildren. I assume a lot has to do with the lack of accurate information. Real change will only come if we are all properly informed. Top scientists are still too often ignored. Information changes our mindset. And that in turn changes our behavior. That's the power of information. That's how we have impact. Let's listen to and unite behind the science. Riding our bikes more, isolating our homes, eating less meat, and changing our consumption patterns have a real direct impact and also save money. To get accurate information, the importance of qualitative education is crucial. It should be there for everyone. After all, a school is a place where you can learn a lot, where you make friends for life, and where especially every young person should have equal opportunities. I really do wish for every child to have a good education and living environment. Also, girls in Kabul, students in Kiev, or young people in Palestine. It is the very foundation to provide equal opportunities. Together, we must cast this strong base of information. The business leaders of tomorrow are in school today. This is a prerequisite to work on the climate crisis. On our Earth, we are also all connected to each other. We all share the same planet, and the climate crisis makes it clear that everything is connected. Climate, education, social justice, oil, war, and our behavior cannot be separated. Solutions exist, both on a small scale, in our own behavior, as on a large scale, through international cooperation. By joining hands, we can meet these challenges. All people are connected. So let's not polarize and instead focus on what unites us. Let's commit to accurate information and constantly put those sustainable glasses on. Working together to minimize climate change can be an invitation to dream together about the desired future of young people, about quality of education, about equality, about how we want to live and interact with our planet in the future. It is a positive invitation that we can embrace together. I came here 2 days ago from Brussels to Warsaw, and I didn't want to take a plane because that all fuels the war and the climate crisis. Still, the train hours and prices were far higher than those of the plane, so I came by bus. 23 hours long. In the durable Europe of tomorrow, we really need to invest more in night trains and other public transports to avoid these irrationally long, sustainable journeys. To connect and inspire over the world, these investments are really necessary. Finally, it is important to include many young people in our search for solutions. So I thank the Green European Foundation for inviting young activists for this keynote speech. After all, the climate story is about our future, so we have the right to be taken seriously and to have a seat at the table at every level. We are not stupid or naive, but we have a dream which we want to pursue with you together. Will you join us in this positive story, connected to a brighter future? The youth will be grateful to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Kurina. I'm a human rights defender from Ukraine. I was raised and born in Lugansk. It's eastern part of Ukraine. And I haven't been at home for 8 years, as well as my family. I came from political opposition, pro-Ukrainian opposition in eastern Ukraine. And it meant not to fight peacefully, it meant to survive every day. I'm really, really grateful to be here in Warsaw, especially because here I feel true solidarity, and sincere understanding what is going on now in the European continent. In my peaceful life, I've been teaching Japanese language in my alma mater university, Luhansk National University, and been dreaming about international relations career. I wouldn't have thought in even my nightmare probably to stand in front of audience convincing that Ukrainians have right to live free, have right to choose their own future, and have right to be democratic, transparent country with rule of law and human rights priorities. I'm really grateful for all the support which Europe has shown already. I'm grateful for the fight which Europe joined. And I would like to express my gratitude, but I also would like to talk more about what is going on every day, every second in my own country. Not only me, I'm not here for telling only my story and being a voice of my generation. I would like to be a voice of all those who are silenced now in Ukraine, all those who have been fighting for Ukraine and with colonial Russia, not even these last 8 years with the start of occupation of Crimea and war in my homeland, Donbass. This colonial war, this colonial resistance has been going for 300 years. Unfortunately, taking the best and the most prominent active representatives of my nation. And currently, all my friends are fighting. Some are fighting, women and men are fighting in front line from the very first day of the full-scale invasion. Some are fighting the way they can, finding their abilities to advocate. I can tell 3 little stories about 3 different generations of Ukrainians, different gender and different background. Those 3 are Roman Ratushny, Irina Danilovich, and Maxim Butkevich. Roman Ratushny was a young, underage person when the Revolution of Dignity started. He was one of those beaten in the middle of Kiev, in the heart of Europe, a student, a schoolboy, during the Revolution of Dignity first days. Roman was fighting big infrastructural monsters who wanted to build high-rise residential buildings in the middle of Kiev in a very great natural area. He has been persecuted by the government and he was hiding, but he fought this war. Now this land is not occupied by some residential buildings. Roman decided to join Ukrainian armed forces at the beginning in February of the full-scale invasion. Roman had birthday lately. He could have been 25 only last days. He laid his life in Kharkiv region. And we have to continue to fight for this kind of people, because such a person like Roman could have been a leader of our democracy in Ukraine. He could be a role model for other European nations, and he paid the highest price for all of us, for my nation, and for European values. Irina Danilovich is a nurse in Crimea who have been fighting with COVID inequality in labor, and also she was contributing to our media as a citizen journalist. You know that journalism was suppressed in Crimea for all these years. Media were attacked and expelled. Free media was expelled from Crimea. She was contributing, not disclosing her surname and name. We have been searching for Irina for 13 days. She was kept incommunicado in Crimea. We have been searching in every detention center in Russia and in Crimea. And only when we made outcry publicly, internationally, we found out that she has been held in local FSB building in Crimea for 8 days. She was exposed to ill treatment. She was fed only once a day, taken to bathroom once a day, and threatened to be taken to Mariupol, where high hostilities were taking place, or to the local forest, if she wouldn't say what those so-called law enforcement were asking her to say. She went through lie detector, and she was forced to sign blank white papers, in potential exchange for freedom. Once she's done this, she was told that some 200 explosives in her bag were found. Now she is facing political prosecution, criminal motivated prosecution, and she can face 6 years of imprisonment just because being vocal, telling the truth, what atrocious human rights gross violations are happening in the peninsula. And the last story is a story about very prominent and very special human rights defender and a friend of mine and a colleague of all human rights community in Ukraine, Maxim Butkevich. All his life, he's older than me, all his life he was there to help those left behind. He was one of the most sincere anti-fascism activists in Ukraine. He was helping migrants and those persecuted. He was a BBC journalist and also contributing to different local medias in Ukraine. Maxim told in his Facebook that he put on hold all his human rights defense activities, and he joined territorial defense and later the armed forces of Ukraine. 24th of June, when I had to speak in UN about atrocities Russia is doing in Ukraine, I got the message with Telegram video where Maxim was kept by Russian forces. Maxim and his soldiers, he was a commander. And now Russian propaganda is telling worldwide that Maxim is commander of Nazi regiment, Nazi division in the Ukrainian armed forces. Can you believe in such perverted reality? The person who was finding peace, a pacifist, sincere, true pacifist for all his life, now is threatened. We don't know about his whereabouts. His family hasn't been contacted even once for all these 2 weeks. And we can, of course, unfortunately think that he can be tortured. We saw some signs of bruises on his face, no matter he was saying he's okay on this video. And we also can predict that they can create some a bad scenario, for example, to prosecute him for terrorism or whatever. The person who spent all his life protecting those left behind, the person who was promoting peace in Europe, he's known in Eastern Europe and in every corner. We ask for public international outcry for Maxim and his soldiers. Yes, he is prisoners of war, and prisoners of war can be kept. But we ask for them to be released and for international humanitarian law be protecting them. What else can I say? My reality is war balance work reality. Work-war reality. Every day I am exposed to monitoring and advocating about forced mobilization of my compatriots in occupied territories, about forced deportation and separation of families, about silencing and threatening thousands of Ukrainian active local communities, teachers, journalists, human rights defenders, activists, cultural actors, and even religious leaders in the occupied territories. My reality is listening to some evidences of children who were taken to Russia and their grandparents have no idea where they are. And my reality is watching the hundreds of square kilometers of my land with grain and with wheat being burned now, just because we are fighting for our democracy, just because we are fighting for international rule of law, for our future. My reality is facing the threat of global hunger, and my friends around the world from Africa, from South America contacting me and asking, is it possible to export grain from Ukraine where the Black Sea will be unblocked? And I have no answers now. My reality is seeing medical facilities or shopping malls or business centers targeted specifically during the day where there are a lot of people, civilians, innocent children there. And my reality is to know that my family is under constant threat, and my friends are also under constant threat. Europe has shown immense leadership during the global pandemic. We were all united, and those who had to receive vaccination, who were left behind, they received it. I believe that this authoritarian dictatorship regime is a new plague, is a new virus in European continent that is already spreading around to other continents. And I believe that European Greens, which are the most progressive part of society in Europe, can take leadership and start to fight together with us in this battle to fight this virus. If we can unite, we can fight it, and we can stop this plague spreading around the world. My colleague who invited me to this event once asked me, where do you find the energy to fight when every day you receive news from the front line, you receive news about the deaths of civilians, you receive news that your parents are listening to air raid alarms or have to hide. They don't have energy now to hide in the basement, they hide in the bathroom because there are two wall rule now in Ukraine is the priority. I find my energy because I cannot betray those generations fighting before us and fighting now. I cannot betray this generation fighting for climate. And we cannot deliver climate changes. We cannot deliver women's rights empowerment. We cannot deliver human rights defense if there is not peace in this continent. And unfortunately, peace has to be armed better than dictatorship. In my nightmare only, I can imagine that I will say it as a human rights defender, where a human life is a priority. But unfortunately, Maxim Butkevich, Roman Ratushny also were not prepared to take arms in their hands, being journalists or activists, but they had to do it. I can finish with one song that also inspires me always, with Nina Simone, American-African singer and civil rights activist. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart, remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree that every man should be free. Let's make Europe and world free from dictatorship.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dominika, Simon, and Maria, for your speeches. Hopefully, people will listen, hopefully inspiring. So thank you very much. And in a minute, we will change the set. We will have a debate. As Maria said, peace basically needs better weapons than dictatorships. So this is, I guess, what will be discussed next here. It will be Polish and Ukrainian perspectives on the security, European idea for security and peace, green security and peace. So thank you very much again. And I would like to... And I would like to welcome now Mélanie Vogel, co-chair of European Greens, here to the floor. Are you around? Okay, she's coming. She will moderate a discussion, as I said, on Polish and Ukrainian perspectives on the security, European vision for security, green peace on the continent. Oh, you're here, sorry. So, Mélanie Vogel, the floor is yours. And maybe you could welcome the...
Are they here?
Yes, they are all
cool.
here. Just, yeah.
Okay.
You have it here.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. Hope you're doing fine. We are now going to start the session on peace and security. As you know, obviously because of what is happening in Ukraine, but also because we are having this event in Poland, and the Polish perspective is very important to what is happening in Ukraine, but also to us Greens. So the title of the session is "What do Polish and Ukrainian perspective mean for the debate on a green European vision for security?" As you know, the war in Ukraine shaped a lot of what were Greens' certainties and positions on certain things, and we did a lot of work to, let's say, move on certain debates. So we have 4 speakers today. Sofia, I don't know if she is there. Yeah, please. Nice to see you. So you're the coordinator, sit wherever you like. You're the coordinator of the program Democracy Support and Human Security of the HBS in Ukraine. So by definition, you became a very qualified expert on what is happening on the ground. Then we have Agnieszka, who is here. Hello. Nice to meet you. Agnieszka is a scientist. She graduated from the Institute of International Relations at the Faculty of Journalism and Political Science at the University of Warsaw. Then she did her PhD in the field of political science, specialized in international relations. And then we have Lena, who is the leader of the Polish Young Greens. Hello. So she's the co-chair of the Polish Young Greens, as I just said. And then we have Gwendoline Delbos-Corfield, who is a member of the European Parliament, who is notably working a lot on the issue of rule of law, especially in Hungary. She's the European Parliament rapporteur on the Article 7 procedure on Hungary, but she also knows a lot of things about the European Greens because she was in the committee of the European Green Party for 7 years, and about basically what is happening with the Greens in the European Parliament. So Sofia, if that's okay, we are going to start with you, with basically the main question being, what is happening in Ukraine? What is the state of play right now? And how do you see the Polish perspective, and how what is happening in Ukraine is now shifting the debate in the EU, especially with the Polish angle?
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning, everyone. And it's a great pleasure being here, but it's even a greater pleasure seeing so many Ukrainian speakers and so many questions touching war in Ukraine and how it has an impact on the Greens, on the Green agenda, and not only Ukraine, but everything beyond Ukraine. What is happening in Ukraine? I mean, you're reading daily the news and you see it everywhere. I'm starting my morning, every morning, preparing daily brief for Share the Truth project that we've started on the 3rd day of the war. And this lasts for nearly 140 days that I have these mornings, reading the news and living with the news and what's happening around my country. One of the latest things, let's start with data. That was yesterday or day before, the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs said there was 17,000 strikes on civilian objects in Ukraine done by Russians. Daily, we read about the human rights violations. Recently, OSCE reported on 18 filtration camps in Ukraine. You learn about Ukrainian cities, not just because of their amazing architecture, or the development ideas, but we learn about Ukrainian cities for the fact where the shelling has taken place. This week we've learned about Vinnytsia, which is central Ukraine, relatively safe city. We now call everything relatively safe. Nowhere is safe and nothing is safe. Vinnytsia was a relatively safe city. In the end, we have 23 people killed, and among them, 3 kids. That was heartbreaking. When I found this news, I was standing crossing the road in Brussels, being safe in Brussels, but reading about the news happening in Ukraine, in relatively safe Vinnytsia. We know about Mariupol, we know about Bucha, Kyiv, Irpin, and dozens of other cities. Mykolaiv, another case. 2 universities were literally shelled. Universities, the premises which meant about educating people, about educating the next generation. It's again, civilian object. What do we have? We have destroyed the institutions. If I lived there, I would like to attend this university, but most likely there will no longer a chance to do that. Last but not least, the article from The Guardian from yesterday, 1,400 new graves identified in Mariupol. Mariupol is a city now everyone knows about it, where I was planning to have one of my projects this autumn. The idea was to bring some students to show this how the cities relive. In the end of the day, now the project's not going to take place because there is nowhere to bring them. And this is how we live, and this is what's happening in the end of the day. It's another Saturday morning. For me, it's 143rd day of the war. What's coming next? These were the data, the latest news. But what's coming next? We got the candidate status, and I very much appreciate this, because this is quite a big push and recognition also of what Ukraine has done over the last couple of years, of this transition and readiness to go. But again, just coming back from Brussels, what we see clearly, it's not going to be a fast track, it's not going to be easy. Everyone's telling us that's quite a hard work that you have to do. That's reforms, these are the conditions that you have to work. This is anti-corruption, media law, national minorities law. There are sets of conditions. And this is just the beginning of the long run. The long run, which we have to implement, having shellings in all across the country. So on the one hand, we still have to push the reform agenda, and we passed the law. One of the biggest achievements the civil society community has been celebrating was finally the ratification of Istanbul Convention. But this reform agenda, which I would like to carry out in a peaceful times, it goes along with air raid alarms. And that's pretty much as it is in the end of the day. We were recently asked, so most likely you have a war in Ukraine, so you don't have to, you don't have conditions to work, and the civil society cannot work at this moment. We said, no, actually, everyone works 3 times more, because you have to be safe and to save your close ones. You volunteer or support any kind of a humanitarian aid efforts or military. And you have to run your projects. So you have 3 front lines. You care about your life, you care about your community, and you have to care about your work. So the burden, and I mean the workload that everyone's carrying is a lot. And the crucial thing is, I work with civil society activists and NGOs. My 2 fantastic colleagues are here in the room. Oliynyk is the founder of Green Academy, and Anastasia is my partner and director of Cycling Association of Ukraine. None of them and none of my partners who are remaining in Kyiv or in Ukraine overall didn't stop working. And the idea is all of us, we were all pretty much the first pacifists, the first calling for nonviolence and speaking about this during our Green Academies that we organize every year in Ukraine. But now we are fundraising for bulletproof vests, for gear for our friends. We check who's safe, who's not. Anastasia, sorry for bringing up your case, but was 33 days in occupation. And she didn't give up. And now we are all fighting, and we are having all of our front lines. And we share the green values, but we reconsider these green values. I'm a democracy coordinator. I very much push for democracy agenda. And I see how this what's called bottom-up democracy is operating, and the civil society, how it contributes. It's amazing. But on the other hand, I feel like I want the democracy to be armed. And this is what makes me, my daily work and what I see makes me reconsider the green agenda, the values that I see in my country, and also motivates me not to stop. And I see the same about the civil society that I work with. They do not stop, because they know that it's now having war around. We talk about already now, on the day 140 days, we talk about reconstruction already, because we know we cannot stop, because we cannot wait until the end when the war will be over. Therefore, we have already the eco-activists and energy activists are talking about what are going to be the next reconstruction projects to make the cities better. Urban development activists are now discussing what are the needs and checking the needs, how to reconstruct cities better. So already now, no one is waiting. People literally are already now talking about reconstruction and how to make the country livable and to work further. But the crucial thing for this, that actually to implement these projects, is that the country starts to be safe, at least a little bit. And another idea is that to to create these conditions that people return. We very much appreciate how Poland and many of other EU countries hosted Ukrainians from the very first day. I admire how literally the Polish borders were open for crossing for people, and people were leaving on the very first days of the war. But also we want to create these conditions in our country that people return, and they feel that it's safe enough to return. And for this requires quite a lot of mobilization. As I said, the EU is clearly saying there will be no shortcut to get a membership, which means there should be work from both sides. Ukrainian community, as I work, I see they are ready to do this. But it's also essential that there is a support from the other side, because as soon as we stop this, the sooner people will return. And also the cost of the war will be smaller for the rest. We see now the feedback we start receiving is, well, there is certain war fatigue that is coming. Winter is coming, the gas prices and the price, people will start receiving bills, with pretty high bills. And we'll pay it with our bank cards, with our cash, literally from our pockets. And then this is where all of us, no matter where we live, we will feel this war in our pockets. Super close. The second thing is, so we talk about the fatigue, we talk about cost of this, and also the third thing, the spending, the military spending and defense spending. These costs, of course, could go for capacity development projects, for development ideas, for building industrial parks, or just beautiful parks outside. I mean, I see how the territory next to the river has changed a lot. This is all taxpayers' money. And these taxpayers' money will have to go for the defense sector, because now the whole Europe, the concept of Europe, has to reconsider how to protect itself. Because at the moment, the military activities, the physical threat, is on the territory of Ukraine. And Ukrainians are pretty much standing to keep it there and to end it as soon as possible. But we need support. We don't ask to come and to fight instead of us. What at the moment everyone is asking, stop buying Russian gas, go with embargo, sanctions, get rid of Russian media, in order not Russian media, but fight this disinformation. This is what's crucial, because it's very well integrated in different spheres. There are a number of things to be done, but it's essential to stop it as soon as possible, because, as I said, winter is coming, we start getting tired, talking about war and reading about war crimes, but it's also what the cost, the money, what could go for amazing parks around, would rather go for defense sector for all of us, or to support Ukraine in the end of the day. And well, I would love to have amazing projects and run seminars on green values in Ukraine, but at the moment, if we don't protect, if we don't provide enough arms, there will be no one for whom to deliver these projects. And people who are right now displaced, those millions, 7 million or something, people who are right now all across Europe, will be the cost to everyone, and they will not return, and even more people will start coming. And it's essential that we create these safe preconditions for people and to ensure that people are willing to return. But this is, as I said, I'm saying this, first of all, as a Ukrainian, not as a program coordinator or as a founder of the Share the Truth project. I'm saying it as a Ukrainian. What we need at the moment, we need, first of all, arms, we need further support and not a fatigue, because we are not tired. As Maria said, as others are saying, we are not tired. We are doing 3 times more now, so we don't give up. And we also ask everyone beyond Ukraine not to give up on us, even if it's going to be a bit costly, because the cost it will increase. But if we don't stop it now, if we don't cut it now, it will take for long. And we'd rather prefer having it to stop it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I'm now, going to, I hope your mic is open. Now I'm going to ask you, Agnieszka, if you could, because you're a specialist of EU-Russia relationship, but so if you can talk about this, but also give us your view on the role that Poland is playing right now in this, and also maybe how you feel the positioning of EU member states towards Poland and the Polish society has changed during the conflict, and what impact it has on the Polish civil society and on the fight for rule of law in Poland, etc. I think your mic is working.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure to be with you here because I have a strong feeling that we have always to repeat our message. That I have also the feeling that I have been doing this since the February 2022, and I'm going to do the same today. So once again, I will explain why we, as Europe, and especially also as Poland, we cannot give up our solidarity with Ukraine. We have to improve our politics because we still have much to do. But talking about Polish perspective, I was thinking what to share with you, because I know that I have only 10 minutes. And it's always too short, but I decided to share with you my 3 conclusions, because talking about Poland, we of course might start with great compliment that Poland was the main supporter of Ukraine. We are still very solidar towards our Ukrainian colleagues and friends and families, in fact. But please remember, this is mostly because of Polish people. Polish government has made much, but not enough. And this is why we should remember that all these gestures of solidarity and absolute support for Ukrainian people, this is because of Polish people, because of grassroots movements. People were going on to the border, were taking the random family and giving them the shelter. So we should divide what is the, let's say, what is the success of the government and what is the success of Polish society. We should remember this because this is very important from my perspective. So let's start. I think that we should remember and we should underline that we, as Poland, we have to stress 3 elements and let's say 3 conclusions we have. Let's say, in July, after half a year of the war in Ukraine. The first consequence for Poland is the security first. Yes, this is the first what we have changed in Poland. Poland turned out to be a frontline country, and because of this, we turned out also to be a neighbor to an aggressive country, to an aggressor which doesn't hesitate to violate the UN Charter. We are next to an aggressor which doesn't hesitate to commit war crimes like Bucha, which doesn't hesitate to use terror methods, like a few days ago in Vinica, because bombing universities and bombing civil, let's say, surroundings, this is terrorism, and we should call Russia a rogue state, finally. Don't be afraid to use proper terms. So this is very important, and for Poland, the very immediate change is the militarization. And I am going to expect more militarization in public, more militarization of public language, more militarization in, let's say, Polish politics. that's more than sure. Than today we spend 2% of GDP on our armies, and it's going to be even more next year. So we have a very populist government, so we are going to have a populist and militarized government next year. So we have to be afraid that Poland will have such a phase very soon, but of course we also should remember that next year we are just having parliamentary elections, so there is a very small chance for a new government. So this is the first consequence. The second one is that alliances do matter, because in Poland for a long time we had very long-lasting discussions what to do with Polish security, whether to organize our defense on ourselves like Israel, but luckily, and I'm sorry for saying this, but luckily because of war in Ukraine, now we as the society, we understood that this is very naive to think about building our security only independently, without NATO, without integration, further integration with European Union. So for me, this is a very positive consequence that we understood that Poland is not a lonely boat on the ocean, on the global ocean. So we have to be more integrated with NATO, and we have to think twice what to do with our European policy, because this is the problem our government is facing now, what to do, whether to give up the conflict with European Union because of violating rule of law in Poland, or to go on. And here I am not so optimistic. So this is the second conclusion, that in Poland we have finally understood that international cooperation really matters, and it doesn't mean that we are losing our independence, or as many of our politicians claim. And the second lesson learned is unfortunately very pessimistic, and this is what I am afraid of, that however we are facing the war the next door, but it doesn't impact our populist government. That means that Putin's aggression on Ukraine has become the perfect cover for populist government. And today we have the problem that, for example, the next year we are going to have the highest inflation in Europe. And what is our government explaining? This is because of Putin, not because of our policy failures, yes, of our wrong decisions. This is Putin's, because of Putin aggression. What's more, we are just waiting, we are expecting new prices increases on electricity, for example. And what is our government talking to Polish people? This is not because of us. This is not because we have wasted millions of euros for green transition, but this is because of Putin, yeah? So that's, yeah, this is why I am absolutely afraid that instead of, let's say, starting to think about country, instead of started thinking about security and how to defend Poland from economic crisis, we are just going on into more populism, into more demagogy in Polish politics. And these are three conclusions regarding to Polish, let's say, agenda and let's say Polish politics vis-a-vis Ukraine war in Ukraine. And I was thinking also what is important to what the message as Poland we should give to our European colleagues, how they should understand what's going on in Poland. And I think that what is very important, and this is also how we in Poland understand the war in Ukraine. We stress that, and we have noticed that our European colleagues have divided into two camps. The first camp is the peace camp, and the second one is the victory camp. And Poland belongs to the victory camp. That camp understands that the most important is to allow Ukraine to win, not to stop the war immediately, but to win, because Polish diagnosis on Russia was not naive, it was not Russophobia, but it was absolutely based on our historical experience, and we, as Lithuania, as Baltic countries, we understand Russian nature of aggressive politics. And we understand, in opposition to some of our European colleagues, that we have to bring Russia to, to have two defeats. The first one in the military, and the second one to make Russia collapse economically. Because only this way we are able to avoid the situation when Russia, a few years later, will go back with the strong feeling that it has survived spectacular historical sanctions, and nothing and no one will be able to stop it. Yeah? So that's why we in Poland and in Eastern flank understand that peace for Europe, security, European security are absolutely dependent on what we will do now with Russia. Either we will make Russia collapse military and economically, or we will give Russia time to lick the wounds and go back with the feeling that no one might stop it. So this is a very important lesson, not only to Poland, but to our European colleagues. And now I'm just finishing. The second and the third lessons are important, but the first one was the basic one. So also as Europe, we should understand that the illusion that Russia might be a reliable partner has ended. Yeah, it's no more time to. It's no more time for Russia first policy. We have to invest our money, time, and energy to strengthen post-Soviet republics in democratization, in integration with Europe, just to give them chance to be a part of the Western world, not a part of Russian bliźnie zarubieże, which is a close neighborhood. And this is our role to do this. And the last message is that this is also for us, and I was talking this with Maria in Berlin last time, this is Zeitenwende, this is Zeitgeist. We should really, we should take this occasion just to make a huge step forward as Europe. I understand, and everyone who is dealing with Russia understands that Russia is afraid of only of a naked power and is afraid of a stronger and more powerful partners. So in our interest is to strengthen European Union, to improve decision-making in European Union, and to go further with green transition, because Russia, depending on oil and gas, has wasted the occasion to modernize. Instead of modernizing, Russia has chosen the path of militarization. So that's why cutting all these ties in energy with Russia, we might weaken Russia very successfully. And this is the first step to our security and the first step to independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think indeed it's very interesting that you show this paradox between a situation that is actually unifying Europe, but at the same time strengthening a government that is participating to the weakening of the EU. So it's a paradox that I think we have to think about. Lena, I'm going to give you the floor now. Basically the question, I hope it still works. Yes, cool. What we would like to hear from you is what is the perspective of the youth and how you are politically active in this moment in Poland, but also between different young green movement across the EU. So give you the floor. You also have 10 minutes, but it's pretty fine to moderate the panel with women only because they more or less keep their time, so that's cool.
Yes, I will try to stick to the 10 minutes or less. Good morning, everybody. So to answer the question, the perspective of the youth on the situation, on what security actually means. When it comes to European youth and our Polish perspective, definitely I think this analogy of this, or this term that was said today, so the victory camp and the peace camp, definitely we can also see it among the green youth. Of course, Poland, also Polish Green Youth, we belong to this victory camp, but the discussions on security, because the discussions on the European level about security are, we see the same division as we see when it comes to just green politics in general. So we discuss what security actually means, how we should approach it. And I think when I realized that there's this big division, once we started discussing among the Green European youth, the question of NATO, whether we are for or against, because as Greens, in principle, we are pacifists. And NATO, for many countries, represents war and aggression, which we as Poles, I don't think Polish people look at it this way, because to us, alliances, international cooperation equals security. This is the certainty that we won't be left alone, and that there will be a bigger brother to just help us defend in case, for instance, Russia decides to attack us next. And I think it really struck me when I learned the arguments of the Western youth when we were discussing NATO, because to me it was always obvious that, yes, I wish we had the world without armies, without weapons, but it's impossible. And we see the war in Ukraine really showed that it is impossible to just pretend we can live without defense and investing into armies, because yes, there is a need for defending ourselves. And I feel that being anti-NATO is a sign of privilege, which on one hand I wish Polish young youth could also have, because that would mean that we are strong on our own and we don't need to worry about defending ourselves, just in case. And I think that, yes, as I mentioned already, for Polish people and for Polish youth, security means cooperation on the international level, unification, and setting specific boundaries, not pacifism at all costs, because, as I said, we are realists and we realize that it's not possible to just close our eyes and say, yes, we won't fight, we don't want any armies, we don't want any weapons, because, we can just deal without it. No, we don't. Since the war broke out, there are multiple times myself, I was worried that what would happen in case I would wake up, just as I did on the 24th of February, and I learned that something happened in Poland. I live in Germany right now, and I cannot count how many times I was trying to come up with a plan. What if? What if it happens? How I can get my family, my parents, to me to Germany? Because I have also this privilege. I could quickly just arrange transport, and they would be safe. So, of course, this is not comparable to the stress that the Ukrainian nation goes through. But the threat is very close to us as well. And this is something that is not reflected in the opinions and the arguments that the Western youth presents, which is understandable. Again, the threat is farther away. But when we are discussing and somebody's questioning my stand or the stand of Polish Young Greens on this, I cannot help but just think this is privilege, which nobody should be shamed for, but at the same time, when you are privileged, you need to realize that you need to understand your privilege. You need to know what it entails and why you should listen to others who might understand the situation a bit better. And this is something I wish we could, I think on all levels, not only among youth, but also just in the general discussion, international discussion, to just say that what you can do is just listen and rely on our translation of the situation because we're closer, we understand this better. And I keep stressing this every single time when we are discussing this on the European level among the youth, that we need to not just close your eyes and tell us you know better, because yes, you can. For you, this NATO is a sign of this and that. But you don't have to worry, then you don't have to come up with this plan how to transport your parents away from the war and what you would do just in case. So that's essentially the message I think Polish Young Greens would like to send, to just please listen and realize what we are saying, because the threat is just, it's close. And without the victory of Ukraine, we won't be able to have peace in Europe at all. And then there won't be a question whether we should have NATO or whether we should have armies. It will be just a question who can survive. The pathways that youth could explore to exert pressure on the politics and the general status quo it's a very difficult point and question to answer, because if we knew, I think we will be in a different place right now. But there are a lot of youth movements that are very vocal right now and are just trying to push a change. And they are mostly, as I see, activist-based movements. It's usually, political movements are also pretty prominent, and we are trying to do our best. But of course, at the forefront are the activists, who are usually climate activists, or just young people who are fed up and are just trying to just unite and just change by doing. And at first, I was very skeptical, because there's always this debate whether activists should be political, whether we should politics should be concerned with activism and activists should be concerned with politics. And of course, things are not always black and white. There's always this gray area, and things are intertwined in many ways. But I was wondering, because there's this debate whether we should change how politics is done, because activism is about getting 100%. You're asking for something and you're not looking for a middle ground. You just want it because you understand there's this sort of pressure. And I think the best example to illustrate this is the climate movements. They ask for 100%. They are not trying to ask for 50, as politicians often do. And so the question is whether we can actually do politics asking for 100%, even if we have this sort of choice and privilege to actually still talk about 50% if our house is on fire, as is often said. And at first I was very critical, because I thought that many activists, even though they're quite effective, they often turn out not to be great politicians. And it comes down to preparation, I feel. But I personally have a very idealistic outlook on politics. For me, this is a service. And many people who just get into politics, they execute their own vision. And sometimes it's very hard for them to function in the system where we have to compromise. But we see that this is not helping, and even this 50% creates tensions and creates conflicts. And that means that the system is stopping to work. And I think soon we will have to decide and reevaluate whether politics, as it is done right now, can even function. And I think for my generation, it cannot, because we already expect different things, and we are already asking for the 100%. And we are trying to do more radical politics. And we use this word radical, but in a very positive sense here. So I think we will see a big shift, and maybe this is also in the context of security, this situation, this war in Ukraine. Maybe this is like another push to a change. And at the end of the day, I wish we didn't have to have this situation, but it might just turn our politics and put it on a different path, which might be more effective for the future, because the world, as I see it, is just only getting worse, and we have more and more complications. And my generation might change it, but we need different tools and different setups. And what the youth can also do, and I wish it would, is just to prepare. Again, if we are going to do activist politics, and I really hope we do, because again, we cannot be asking for 50% anymore. The youth, to do it well, needs to learn, needs to learn new skills and prepare for being a politician, just being this grader. Every generation says that they will be a better one than the previous one, and it's usually not the case, because we are all just repeating the same mistakes. But I really hope that if not my generation, my children will be those who will actually do things the right way, in the better way, and not repeat the mistakes we've been making. And I think that my generation, that's why I'm still hopeful, even though I'm just very critical when it comes to these idealistic ideas, is that my generation, we have this very natural way of just grouping and associating ourselves. And I think that the way we can win is just to stand together and not just play everybody for themselves. So, and we do it very well as the climate strikes, as different movements shown that we are very good at organizing ourselves and asking for what we want, and we can exert pressure. So this is definitely how we can move forward. And again, I wish we didn't have to do it right now, and I wish so many young people didn't have to sacrifice so much to just basically ask for security and for air to breathe in the future, also for their children. But if this is needed, we will do it, and we will do it together in a group, and hopefully this will just change how everything is done. In 50 years, if I will be ever sitting in a panel like that again, I will be just talking and reflecting back on how certain bad events in the 20s or 21st century actually created a situation that we are living in a better world right now. Better because finally somebody put their foot down and created a different infrastructure for how politics and activism is done. Yes, I think this is, I hope I answered the question on the perspective of the youth.
Thank you very much. So yeah, that's good that you also talked about the debate on NATO. That's, I think, something that came across all different youth organizations out of the Greens, but also Green parties in general. And that you talked about how we do politics and whether we are, to what extent we can continue to try to compromise, and what is the price for this. Because now I'm going to give the floor to someone who first had to discuss about all these things, including NATO in the European Parliament, which is a place where you can ask for 100%, but you always get something around 50, because that's the place for compromise. So basically the question is, Gwen, can you tell us all the, like when the war started, it obviously shaked a lot of positions of the Greens, and I guess there were a lot of debates inside of the group on sending weapons, on spending suddenly a lot of money on military expenditures, on NATO. So could you explain us how it went, the debate inside of the Green family in the European Parliament? And maybe also if you could tell us what impact this debate had on other issues like what we do with the rule of law, what we do with the enlargement procedure, like how this situation when it comes to the war also impacted the way we deal with other topics we were already dealing before. I think you have a mic, yeah, great.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Yeah, indeed, the Ukraine war, of course, was something that triggered new debates, accelerated some, degraded some in our group, in the parliament, and then in the interinstitutional discussion between the three institutions, of course. For our group, I think that the first thing that has to be said is that it reinforced or at least deepened a number of positions that we had already, and that we then pushed even more. And on these aspects, there were basically no debate, but there was even more the wish to push on this. Of course, it's the idea of cooperation, the idea of unity, and the idea of political coordination. Because if you are to put more money for military, at least you want a European coordination and not a 27 national coordination. And it comes back to something that you talked about every country thinking it's defending itself. And for once, there was this idea of a European defense. Of course, it strengthened unity. I will come back on some aspects that have been said, maybe sometimes with the sacrifice of some Polish specific debates, for example, and we asked for even more cooperation. We also, of course, used this situation to focus on the fact that we needed transparency every time. We needed scrutiny of parliaments on how the money is used and how these military aspects come in, and control of arms. And of course, we always say that even in war, human rights are a fundamental thing. It also, of course, but that I think it comes without saying, it also, of course, strengthened our debate on climate issues and energy, and it has the paradox that it has brought back some coal to be functioning again in Germany and France, and the winter is coming, and we don't exactly know how it will turn, but it had the effect that suddenly everyone was saying we need to get out more quickly from fossil fuels. So this is, of course, it made our discourse relevant also on autonomous energy and all of this. And then, of course, it strengthened our positions on the enlargement, the question of the Balkans, the fact that they had been put on the side for a long time, and with Ukraine asking for a quicker step to European Union, it allowed us Greens to recall that we needed to address the situation of Montenegro and of Macedonia, which are two member states that are fully complying with a number of what we are asking and are still not seeing their path to European Union going speedy. So these are the main things where we were basically just reinforcing and enriching our positions. And then, of course, there are those topics where it was more difficult. It doesn't mean that we were fighting or anything, but it did make us debate. The first one, and I think it was really the sentence Maria said was very nice, all of the question of arming peace. Indeed, history of Green parties in a number of our member states is from pacifist parties. It is a very common history of our parties in France, in Netherlands, in Germany. I mean, very, very often, and it is one of our main trends. And it doesn't mean that it's a naive way of seeing peace, and it doesn't mean that we haven't had for years discussions about wars, because wars have been happening everywhere, sadly, on the planet, and we had to decide what we would do about it in each of our parties. But of course, for the first time, it became very relevant and very close and very urgent to take decisions, which we could have always a bit put on the side and have in a very theoretic way. For the first time, it was no more theoretic. Honestly, it didn't make that much debate in the group. It is it was very clear for everyone that the situation meant that we had to put more money for arms and for security, and it's not indeed what we think is the priority in time of peace. We always defend other means or other use for money, but this was a particular moment. And once again, we would always say, you know, but this means first that we need political coordination. Second, that we want not France to go on increasing its own budget, but it's a more coordinated money, and free, of course, parliamentary scrutiny. But we had to come to this very difficult realistic consideration that we had to arm peace. Yes, it happens. We had the discussion on NATO. There again, on a geopolitical debate, we often have these different point of views. In France and in certain southern country, as you said in a very nice way, we have this privileged way of seeing things that America is not a protection, and we have been always very criticizing America, and then you might have heard of some of important French politics members from all political sides in France being very sort of in a defiant position towards USA for years now, and NATO is symbolizing the domination of USA for a lot of our green or leftist people in France and a number of other member states. So this is indeed a complicated discussion. We always have very prudent words on NATO, even today. When we did our last paper on security and peace, that was the major discussion. You have to not forget also that we have member states that are still not wanting to align in any way. Yes, Finland has changed its position, for example, Denmark, but it's not the case of Austria, for example, which is still a country that doesn't want to align, and our Austrian Greens are very close to this position. So the wording that we use for NATO is always very prudent, but there again, I don't think it stirred that much disagreement. We just needed to find the prudent wording, and I think we acknowledge the fact that it is a privileged way of seeing things, that, as you said, we shouldn't be ashamed, but we should acknowledge it, that it's because we could see things like that for years, and hopefully this debate will always exist, because it's healthy that the debate exists. Now, the third issue, which was not a debate between us at all, but is a difficult situation for us Greens in the European Union debate and the interinstitutional discussion, is the rule of law issue. This is an issue where we Greens have been at the forefront a lot. We have the reports on that. We have we are the one pressuring Commission, Council, and all of this. We are the group really always fighting on Hungary and Polish and trying to be the voice. Other groups are, but we even more than others are trying to be the voice of Polish and Hungarian society. And of course, in this debate, in this very specific moment since Ukraine war, the Polish situation has considerably changed on the European Union stage. When I became a member of the European Parliament in 2019, it's my first term, Poland was very, very isolated. It was the isolated member state. All the groups would be very unhappy with Poland, except from ECR, the group where the government party is. In council, I would always hear very bad thing about the Polish government, and basically it was the isolated government. And Hungary was not, because at the time Fidesz, Orban's party, was still in the big group in parliament. There was still a lot of chief of government that would have good relationship with him. Even Angela Merkel was a bit sometimes prudent with Viktor Orban, and basically he was very good in dealing with things, so he would be still in the group in the big group. And in 3 years, we have been seeing a complete shift. Now Hungary is very isolated, and Poland is no more. And in fact, even Poland government has managed to be a bit in the center of things these last months. And this is, of course, very, very concerning for us and dangerous. How do we do with this? How do we do when we also know all the hypocrisy that's behind it? I mean, in the month, it was 1 month after the beginning of the war, when all the refugees were coming in Poland, and we had this discussion with lawyers and judges, these very loyal judges that have been fired by the government or so sanctioned that their life is so hard, and all of these lawyers that are fighting, and you know, they were the ones saying, I have a family in each of the rooms of my house. The government is not doing anything about the refugees, and we are being told, yes, but you know, we should basically be indulgent with your government because now you are welcoming all these refugees, so we should do something about you. And we were in this very bizarre situation where, in fact, the government, it was instrumentalizing a very specific situation, and there was a sort of a double punishment for the leftist activists that were at the same time the one fighting the government, and at the same time the more fighting next to the refugees and on this. So this is something we have to be very careful of. We have a real threat that civil society in Poland would be sacrificed in the name of unity, in the name of facing the Russian Putinization and the Russian fight against rule of law, which is, as you said, very paradox. So this is one of our big threat, and this is a debate we have a lot. How do we Greens be careful in this debate to find the path where indeed we work with, where we need Poland to go on being this fighter against Russia, at least in the symbols and the values and all of this and what they say, but we still go on criticizing what is happening very strongly, and we are not indulgent, and we are not giving money to a government if it's for them to badly use it and not use it for the welcoming of the refugees and for reconstructing things and for recovery, etc., etc. 3 quick issues that I wanted to focus on is the gender issue. I think that how rape in Ukraine was used once again, and we know that it's for centuries, millennia been a habit, but how rape has been used as a war weapon has not made, I feel, enough debate in France, and has not been used. And also how immediately, you know, women and children came to all of our countries, and then men stayed, and how women are facing and coping with the situation. I think that this gender issue is not even enough. We're not working enough on it. Women in war. Well, how do we deal with this? I think it's even more relevant to talk about this topic in Poland, where the attack against women is one of the worst attacks on human rights of this government, and how they are the one really being sacrificed. I just wanted to also tackle the issue of very specific, bizarre dynamics at the moment in all member states. We are in a moment where discussions are going to be different and situations are going to be strange. We have all the frugal countries that they don't want to put money anymore in European Union, and how are they going to deal with this situation? We have indeed the reinforcement of the discussion of we need to open our arms to Balkans, and Europe is also there, and we need to protect them from Russian. It has also meant that countries like the Baltic countries have stepped in the debate much more than they had always been. The Baltic country would be very silent in most of the debates, in council, in commission and all this. And the Baltic countries are really speaking up much more. So we're seeing an involvement of these three countries that I think is very interesting and will maybe also help shaping things with the Eastern countries. And then the last thing I wanted to signal is, of course, the discussion on refugees. We manage with this crisis to use this thing that existed for a long time in our text, the temporary protection. We had not managed to use it for the Syrian people. We left them on the side. For the Ukrainian, we managed. It's absolutely amazing. You have to, in a country like France, there is one place where Ukrainian refugee will arrive and you will get all info. And the info goes not only from how do you do your papers, but how you can find a job, how we can help you with housing, how can we send your children to school, how can we help you with benefits, welfare benefits and all this. Something that we have never been able in this European Union to provide to any refugees before. Even those that they managed after 20 years of very hard, difficult situations. For the Ukrainian, we used it. I do hope that this will be an example that we can, and that it facilitates everyone's life, in fact, that it's not that difficult, and that we should use it more often.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the four of you. I'm now opening the floor for questions. We are basically on time. I mean, we kept our time. People before us were late, but that's not, yeah. So if anyone has questions, I see a lot of people, that's cool.
So maybe I will collect
like
them.
3 maybe, and then we answer and we take another round.
You? Okay. Could you introduce?
Hi, I'm Tomasz Ganow from Poznań in Poland. On an occasion of talking about the rule of law, I have my remark that we should not understand it in a narrow sense, that it's only about courts and tribunals, because if we treat it seriously, we see that in Poland, because I know this politics the best, better than other countries. So in Poland, I see that the ignorance of rule of law is not only in the governing party, but also in the biggest oppositional party, like it's Platforma Obywatelska, because the European programs like infrastructure and environment have certain goals. And we can complain that these goals are not enough green, and we think about new programs. But the practice was that even such a minimum green program, which is included in these big operational programs, they are just ignored, and the European Union believes that the people on the place care about this program, and control does not exist, because these documents for money are accepted by the ministry or a province governance. And in Poland, they are just happy that the capital is coming to the country, and they don't care about development, they care about the growth. So the local companies are happy because they build something, but they build, for example, city highways, and the projects are done with the pretext. So we improve a little bit a tram track, but we built a huge auto highway, and so this is like this.
Thank you. And you, yeah?
Thanks a lot for the floor. My name is Efthymios Rafael Angelis, and I live in Athens, in Greece. So I would like to state that even if I acknowledge the need that the Eastern countries have for NATO, I would like to state that it's not a privilege for some countries. It's also, like a NATO criticism, it's not a privilege because, for example, in Greece, when like both Greece and Turkey are in NATO, and NATO funds for weaponry in both countries, and actually it's NATO behind the tension, and Greece like spends a lot of partition of the GDP for weaponry when we could invest the same money in alternative, in sustainable resources, in sustainability. I mean, in this case, it's not that we criticize NATO because we have an anti-USA narrative. It's just that we criticize NATO because, for us, it causes a problem because if there is an invasion of Turkey in Greece, no one is going to help us from NATO. And I think that this criticism is more than like, it's, you know, we can use it in order to find alternatives. As an alternative might be a European army or common safety policy, but in a real pan-European federalistic level, and not just creating mechanisms like Frontex. For example, Frontex is a mechanism that violates human rights in borders, like Frontex participates in pushbacks of refugees. So instead of, in European level, creating useless mechanisms, we might use the anti-NATO criticism in order to improve our union and find common, realistic solutions to our problems for all European countries in a pan-European level. Thanks a lot.
Eva Sofia Stefageleni. First of all, I'm very happy to have 100% female debate on this issue because I believe that we have some issues and topics and positions and lights that we probably would not have if we had 100% male debates, as it's usually the case in this topic. So I have just one question for Gwendoline and one question for Lena. For Gwendoline, what do you think about European defense? If there is some progress, because we are there are so many years that we are speaking about this European defense. Is it still an utopia, or are we a little bit going progress on this topic? And to Lena, I know that you are interested and you work on digital security, and we have this digital war of information. And we have a lot of articles in Poland about ideology of Dugin, Alexander Dugin, who is one of advisors of Putin on this how to use this digital war of information in this Cold War or war for power. So what do you think about it, about this protection, about this disinformation, and using the internet for that? Thank you.
Thank you. And one more here. Sorry, I don't remember who was first. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Ewa Driańska. I'm from Warsaw. I would like to comment about the Ukraine and Russia, that it was kind of obvious if you observed the history and the moves of Russia, that the aggression will be just going forward. So since the Chechen wars, since the aggression on Georgia, and then the Crimea, and there was this famous letter of the Polish intellectuals, including Professor Bartoszewski, which was warning the West so as not to repeat the mistake of appeasement, which was made toward Hitler. So they were warning not to appease Russia, because it will end like this, that Russia will move forward with this aggression. So I would like to turn your attention to the fact that European companies, despite all these hostile acts of Russia and aggression on the neighboring countries, they pursued with making business. And I mean, not only gas, but also in very sensitive areas like defense. And even now, this year, after the start of the war, they say, okay, we will not make interest like business in gas, but why not make some nuclear deal? I mean, one of the French companies. So I think our task now is to make this huge pressure on the politicians and on business and on the companies, so as not to make this happen again, that we have such ties of the companies and so on. And when the crisis comes, they say, oh, we cannot afford to cut connections with Russia because we are so financially dependent. And the other issue I would like to rise here is the issue of human rights, and in the context of the COVID. So I see this huge threat that the vaccine mandates, how there is such a big risk of human rights violations, and they took place in European countries and also in other democracies like Canada and Australia. And I think that our biggest strength and the future of the citizens of Europe is the human rights, and is the main value which we should defend. So we should take care of that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'll be very quick. Okay. So, hello. My name is Yun. Oh, it's weird hearing my voice. So, apologies for my pronunciation, but to Anjeska, you were talking a lot about how, for example, governments like to push the blame on external factors such as the war in Ukraine, and then they abandon their responsibility for citizens. Because I feel samely about the situation in the UK, because we had a lot of corruption with like COVID scandals and just spending like, it was 33 billion on like a contract tracing system that didn't work, for example. And that is a factor in inflation. So my question would be like, how do we get governments to take responsibility to care for their citizens while also keeping support for Ukraine as well, and not just blaming Russia as the boogeyman and actually doing something about it rather than just blaming it?
Okay, thank you very much. I propose that we start the other way around. So I'm going to first maybe give you the floor, Sofia, for the, I think, the question before the last question on whether it's actually accurate to say that the aggression was obviously coming and that we had elements to foresee it. Oh, which one you prefer?
Well, that's a very fair point, because in 2014, we saw that how it all started. Then we had Minsk agreements, and there was sort of there's going to be a ceasefire, but ceasefire never happened. That was like constantly violations of the ceasefire, and that was like literally believing Russia that they will stop at one point. No, that's quite a risky business. But it's not only about that. Indeed, it was clear something like this going to come. Me personally, I would still trying to deny the fact that they will attack Kyiv. Like, maybe it's my tunnel vision, but I was still like trying, like, I didn't want to accept this fact, but it happened. And now I know, like, yes, it was pretty clear that they will never allow and they will never recognize Ukraine as an independent state and moving into European Union direction or any other direction than Russia. Another aspect, what's crucial to talk about today's war, is colonial ambitions that Russia had. And now we understand that what's happening at the moment, this is this imperialist approach that Russia was having for years, literally for years. So we talk here from 1990 and even before, because we talk about how Russia was fostering this energy dependence, industrial dependence, how they were eradicating any signs of identity. Even in art, you will often see Russian artists, but rarely saying Ukrainian artists. So now when we look today, we see this, what we have the situation, the attack is something that was happening already, preparing for many, many years. Because again, Russia would never like to accept or take any other direction that Ukraine would take than Russia. And therefore, indeed, it is. One maybe more remark, this is also to the panelists, because we talk about this, we cannot sacrifice right now the civil society and the human rights. Indeed, I mean, sacrificing, making any concessions in terms of land, of human rights, equals the same. If we say like we give up on human rights, it's a victory to Russia. If we give up on civil society, it's a victory for Russia. If we give up on Ukraine, I mean, this is a victory for Russia, but a big loss for everyone. Therefore, here I would say, like, we should be really having this unity as it is at the moment, but rather than divide, because the divide will mean, again, this is a victory for Russia, but a loss for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm now going, to give the floor to Agnieszka. I think basically the first and the last questions were more for you, so
more or less,
full of
but
flow.
the last one was absolutely
for you.
But let's start with Poznań question. You know what you were mentioning. It's absolutely a very important issue for Poland, because just imagine when Poland was joining European Union in 2004, we were believing that this is the end of history, yes, that we are just stepping the heaven and our life will be good for the rest of our lives. So what we have wasted, this is an occasion to work on civic education. We forgot to teach our young generation that European Union is not only money. This is not only about, let's say, comfort life, but these are human rights. This is let's say, rule of law, and we spoiled that occasion. Yes, I do not blame exactly only peace government, but I blame all our governments that were ruling our country for so many years, since 2004. They were talking about everything, but about education, about critical thinking. You know, this is the problem. We have to go back to the roots and start talking about not only about constitution, but also about basic rights, basic human rights, and our obligation as citizen. So this is the problem. This is the failure we have to make up very quickly, because if not, we have to be ready for more populism, for more right-wing parties, for more, let's say, radicals. Yeah, I am really afraid of our next elections, because I predict that peace government will win, but not with the majority in the parliament. But I am afraid about the support for our extra our alt-right party, which is Konfederacja. And Konfederacja, this is absolutely these are not only populists, but these are very dangerous people because they are very influenced by Dugin, by Kremlin. They are talking about more, not only conservatism, they are talking about making Russia in Poland, yes, about making Russia be similar to, let's say, yes, Aga is, yeah. Yeah. Okay. It was not a very, yeah.
It was a pretty large question.
Okay, so this is one thing. And another thing is the answer to you is that, you know, I am asking the same question because I would like my government. Okay, these are right-wing politicians, but they should think about people and the country. And I think that they should take responsibility in our upcoming elections. So we have to vote, let's say, like, do you remember Navalny intelligent, smart voting? Yes, we have to vote smart. You know, the idea of Navalny is very actual in Poland. So I think that this is one thing, but...
Don't vote for the Tories. That's
we have...
That's the solution.
And, you know, these both answers are combined because without civic education, Polish people, very often, they are not prepared for voting. We don't read programs, political programs. We do not understand what is the left and what is the difference between the left and the right. What does it mean, peace government? Whether it is not only conservative, but these are much more than conservative. They are ready to implement traditional values, like in the past President Putin was implementing in Russia. Peace government is ready to violate human rights, to fight opposition, to close independent media. Of course, I do not expect that we will have Navalny and such activists will end up in a jail, but you know, we are very close to Russian path, and this is why I am absolutely afraid, and I am calling my Polish colleagues, my Polish friends, and Poles generally to vote smartly next year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lena, I'm going now to ask you if I think the question on NATO and Greece was directly directed to you, and then the question on digital security and the role of internet in peace and security.
Yes, so when it comes to NATO and the Greek-Turkish conflict, I think, of course, the situation is very complex, and saying that every single country that's anti-NATO has the same sort of reasoning would be oversimplifying it. But it's still, I think that, of course, even though there are different reasons, still in this debate right now, when we are talking about the defense and defending Ukraine and Baltic countries, Poland, it's still a privilege to say it's still a privilege to say that we can do without it. Of course, I agree with you that we should be looking for better solutions and maybe have European army, maybe just find another way, and ideally find a way so that we never have to have this debate again. But I think right now we cannot. I think it would be very irrational or irresponsible to spend time looking for new solutions when we need to act now and we need to take certain steps right now. And again, I'm not saying NATO is an ideal organization and I love everything about this, but it's a promise of security for me as a Polish citizen. So that's, I think, even though I agree with you, and this is not as simple as we can just put into word privilege, it is still a privileged position in a way to just maybe not be aware of certain reasons and certain phenomena and to say, no, we don't want it, but what then we do instead? NATO is currently supporting the war efforts or the defense of Ukraine, and saying no to it and just cancel it is wrong. I mean, in Germany, for instance, I live in a fairly political city, and there's a lot of students who are interested in politics. It's mostly green, mostly leftist options. And I see a lot of banners saying delegalize NATO, fuck NATO, different things. And for me, it's just very interesting to see just after the war broke out. The banners weren't there, or maybe they weren't so prominent before, and they're there now. And we're talking about defending a country in Europe, which is very close to Germany. So this is this big dissonance I see, and something I just don't understand, because maybe I'm just aware of too many things, and I have to be aware of too many things. So that's what I mean by privilege. And when it comes to disinformation, this is a very interesting topic. First of all, there's a difference between disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is spreading purposefully information that is wrong for different purposes, whereas misinformation is spreading information that is wrong, but by accident, by believing that, for instance, something is this or that, but it's actually not that, but you just haven't checked, or you haven't done your research, and you're just passing the information on. Russia has been excellent at spreading disinformation for years, and it was mostly visible in the Balkans, where there was this big, full-fledged campaign on anti-EU, essentially. So there was a big infiltration of information, just spreading anti-EU communications and information, and it was working. There are studies done, it was working. It was really changing the narrative and the public view on the EU. And right now, during this war, disinformation is essentially one of the bigger weapons, because it influences our responses all around the globe. And we can see it, and it changes also Polish debate. There's a lot of disinformation that people believe in, because it's usually very black or white, very simple messaging, something that it's easy to fall for, and people just don't have this sort of tools to distinguish what's right or wrong, and they're just too lazy to do their research. But of course, like, if we have media, we want to just get the information from there. Not everybody has time to do some research. And I think the key here, and that's what the EU has been doing for years as well, is to just educate people on critical thinking and on finding information that's correct. Yes.
Thank you. I've just learned that we really have to finish soon. So, Gwen, if you can answer in one sentence about the European Defence Union, in one sentence.
Okay, there was a few other questions, but I can answer only this one. We're not advancing that well, no. It's still more about just adding money to buy weapons, a bit of thinking of autonomous supply chains and all of this, and a bit of thinking about coordination. But then we would go in a lot of discussion on unanimity and all of this. But of course, what happened with the Hungarian government, especially on the sanctions and all of this, I think is, on the other hand, opening the mind of a lot of governments on the fact that we need to advance on some political coordination that are not threatened by one member state when it wants to take hostage a topic. So this is, I think that we have hope on a work that would be a holistic, with a lot of criteria of human rights and all this thinking behind it. But for the moment, honestly, it's more just about adding money.
Thank you very much. That's, yeah, you want to say? Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we will adjust our plans a bit. So let's make a very short break till 12. At 12, the streams will start. So be please a bit disciplined. I know it's very tense, but there are very interesting streams waiting at 12. And then 1:30, we will be back here for the discussion with a Green European Member of Parliament. So this is the plan.